Most small businesses sell for somewhere between 2 and 4 times their yearly profit, but the exact same business can be worth 4 times or more purely based on how dependent the business is on the founder day to day. So in this video today, I'm going to show you exactly how, by removing yourself as the founder of your e-commerce business, you can dramatically increase the scale of your business. We'll even break down the maths to show you how you can add £250,000 and more to the value of your business based on a few simple decisions that you can make today. Now, who am I to talk about this? Well, my name is James Eardley. I've generated over $2.1 million with my own e-commerce business. And so I've also taken other e-commerce founders through the scaling phase of their business up to 100K a month, while simultaneously removing the founders from needing their daily involvement in the business by installing systems, team, and the things that we're going to talk about in the video today. Because a lot of people overlook how much value we can add to a business because they're too focused on things like adding more traffic, adding more products. But the truth is, if the business is still dependent on you as a founder, no one's going to want the business. So what is the problem here that we need to solve? Well, a lot of e-commerce founders that I speak to, I spend a lot of my time coaching e-commerce founders or consulting with them or hiring people into businesses. And so I've got a unique view where I can see how a lot of e-commerce founders start and how they scale. Now, a lot of e-commerce founders get stuck in the day-to-day operations because initially you're wearing all the hats, and that means you need to do some operations, you need to do some customer service, you're still involved with signing suppliers, or you're involved with the sales, the marketing, and having constant decisions on your plate every day. Now, business works, but only because you're involved and you've trained yourself to be able to do all these parts of the business. However, no one's ever trained you to remove yourself from those parts of the business. So if you were to disappear for any reason out of the business, things are going to slow down, if not break entirely. This means you don't actually own a business. It's not an asset that has value. You only really have a job that you've built for yourself. So let me break down the maths for how valuable this is. Let me give you an example of an e-commerce store. Let's say it's doing 50K a month revenue and about a 20% profit, net profit margin, so about 10K a month profit. That is 120K profit per year. Now, we're going to do in case one, that's founder dependent, and in case two, it's a systemized business. So case one, the owner is still involved very much in the operations, the decision making, the problem solving, and so the risk for a buyer is high. So the multiple of that business is going to be sort of 2 to 2.5 times the annual profit. So we're looking at a valuation of somewhere between £240,000 and £300,000. Now, in case two, with a systemized business, systems are in place, a team is handling the day-to-day operations, the owner is not needed and required for the day-to-day operations, and therefore it's predictable and stable, and therefore the multiple to expect for this type of business can be sort of 3.5 to 4.5 times the annual profit, meaning that this business is now worth £420,000 to £540,000. That is a huge increase of somewhere between £180,000 to £300,000 increase in value by not increasing the revenue at all, by not increasing the profit margins, but by removing the founder as being relied upon within that business. Now, that's not to mention thinking about if you've removed the founder from the day-to-day, how much more they'd be able to scale the business in terms of revenue and how they'd be able to improve the margins if their focus can be on that. But let's disregard that for a second and just talk about the fact that you can get £180,000 to £300,000 worth of extra sale value if you're able to remove yourself from the business. So that is a huge shift, and it comes from being very intentional. And to be intentional, we need to make a shift of our thinking as a founder of a business. The majority of founders and the way that they think every day or every month is, I need to increase revenue. But the real leverage, as we've just discovered with that maths there, is that making the business run without you is the true leverage that you can get from a business. If you're looking to scale, if you're looking to exit, the business needs to be able to run without you. Because buyers are ultimately looking for systems that run the business day to day, predictability of how the business runs day to day, and ultimately independence from the founder, because they don't want the business to collapse when you leave, when they buy it from you, and they don't want to buy a job for themselves and have to give themselves things that they are going to be required to do day in, day out in order to scale that business. So how do we actually go through that process? How can we add this significant amount of value to our business? Well, let me walk you through the process now. Firstly, we need to visualize the business. Working with e-commerce brand owners, it always surprises me how few are able to have a clear visual look at their business and know how they generate customers and how they service those customers. So the first step is just to become intentional of what is the function of the business, how do we actually generate customers, and how do we service those customers. Everything in your business, all the tasks that you do, all the tasks that anyone else does towards the business is all part of a machine. And you need to start viewing your business as a machine, which is a series of repeatable tasks that are completed in order to give out products or give out services and generate profit for the business. Once you visualize things, it becomes a lot easier to go through the rest of this process. Then we move on to documenting how those things are done. So now we can see how the business runs. We can now look at all of the individual tasks that make up the machine that is your business, and we'll document how those tasks are completed. So that means getting things out of your head, how you run the business, and into paper or Google Docs or something online like Microsoft Word documents, so we can see step by step how the business does that. Then step 3 is to hire people into positions for running the day-to-day operations outside of you as the founder. Now we need to make sure anything that isn't directly generating income or directly managing how the business is operating day to day is not done by you, because we need to free you up, firstly to become a scalable or sellable business, but also so that you can actually grow the business because you've got the space to think about how to grow the business. So look at the tasks that you've just documented and look at the ones that shouldn't be being done by you as the founder, and then we're going to hire people in to take over those roles. And because we've documented the process, it'll be quick for them to pick up and follow the processes that you've laid out. Then the next step is to assign ownership to different people in the team to different parts of the business. And the goal is to not have the founder as the owner of any individual part of the business, because that means they're dependent on, which is something that we're trying to get away from. So I see people make this mistake, is they hire help, but they don't give away the ownership of that part of the business. And so that team member that they've hired still end up having to come back to the founder to get approvals for everything, to check if they're doing the right work, and it negates the need for hiring them in the first place. So assign ownership around the business to those people. Then the next step is to ask those people to report on the most important metrics for their area of the business. And this is how you can start looking from a top-down situation at all of the reports that are being provided to you by the relevant people in your team who are managing the different departments. And you can see what's performing, what's not performing, where do we need to improve, and what's working well that we can double down on. Which moves us on to the final step, which is the optimizing part, which is where we can see what's working, we can see who's owning what part of the business, and we can see where can we improve individual parts of the business that will make a meaningful impact on the business. If you're still involved in any part of the business at this point, this is where we would optimize that to be able to run through automation or through a system or through a different team member, so it's no longer on your plate. Now, when we've been through this process, we now have a systemized business that can run independent of the founder. And as we've talked about, we're increasing the multiple that the business can sell for by double, which often gives a valuation. If you're doing 120k profit a year, we can add on an extra £200,000 to £300,000. And it's through that process, removing yourself as being relied upon, setting out how the business runs and who is running the business on your behalf. And that then makes it a scalable and sellable company if you decide to exit one day. So I hope you've enjoyed that video, and I hope you can see how this is going to be making e-commerce millionaires this year, if implemented and if understood. If you want more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. I release videos like this where I explain how you can scale your e-commerce brand based on systems and hiring the right team. And with that said, I'll catch you in the next video.